Okay, we are
Thank
ready.
you.
Hanukkah is out of the way. Purim.
That's exactly what we're doing here. Good afternoon and welcome to, not officially that we were welcomed by Rav Shmuley, but the first United States Torat Chayim Yom Iyun. I will be giving a shiur this afternoon on exactly what the title says here, Mirror Images, the Yosef and Esther Narratives, Unpacking the Secret to Our National Survival. As we just heard a voice from over here, not in the camera, but Rav Asher Lopatin mentioned we're through with Hanukkah, we're moving on to Purim. So that is precisely why I chose this topic for this time of year, in addition to the fact that we are in the middle of, towards the end of the Yosef and his brothers narrative in the Chumash. This coming week, of course, is Parashat Vayechi. We're finishing that chapter of our history as well. And I want to begin with Megillat Esther, because we're all familiar with the story, and perhaps some of us in this room have gone into it in further detail. When reading it and rereading it and rereading it, the questions just compound upon each other. There are so many questions about the text itself regarding the story. We're not going to get so much into the story. Instead, we're going to focus on Esther primarily and to Mordechai. We think of Esther, of course, as the hero, as the heroine of the story. Mordechai played perhaps as much of a role, but in a way, at least the way that she's presented in the Talmud, she played a greater role. The question is, why did she go to the extreme that she went? And we'll see what I mean by that in just a moment. We're going to go through several sources that you have in front of you. We will then later move on to the story of Yosef. I know that our time is limited. We will show how the texts, this is well documented, has been dealt with by many before, are very similar. It's almost as if the authors of Megillat Esther, whoever they may be, and that's heavily debated, including when Megillat Esther took place, again, which we're not going to focus on now, but as if the authors of Megillat Esther had the story of Yosef opened in front of them, and in today's parlance, copy-pasted a lot of the text from the story of Yosef to Megillat Esther. We'll use that as an opening to the thematic parallels, and then hopefully emerge with what indeed is the secret to our national survival, which to some extent speaks for itself. But let's just take a look here. We're not going to go into the first source so much that I have here, except to focus on the last couple of psukim. Pasuk Chaf Aleph, the second to last pasuk, tells us as follows: L'kayem alehem, Esther and Mordechai, and of course the Sanhedrin of the time, established for all future generations, that's coming up in just a moment, Liyot osim et yom arba'a asar lechodesh adar ve'et yom chamisha asar bo b'chol shana b'shana. We interrupt the shiur just to say hello to those that just entered the room. Welcome, it's nice to see you. B'chol shana b'shana, every single year. In other words, the war transpired on the 13th. The following day was a day of celebration. That was the 14th. In Shushan, in the capital city, the war lasted 2 days, including the 14th, and therefore they celebrated on the following day. But this was to be a holiday. It was to be celebrated b'chol shana v'shana, and every single year. Now, let's just take a break for a minute. Why? Weren't there many similar events that happened with Klal Yisrael over the period of time back then in this historical era and before then? And suddenly this becomes a holiday? We'll see in the Gemara that Esther, not Mordechai, apparently, Esther is the one that really, really pushed for it. Why? She was persistent. What? Yes, we survived. But we survived many attempts at our extermination. What made this such a big deal to Esther? Furthermore, the next pasuk stresses again that this holiday must be celebrated v'lo ya'avor, according to the pshat, or the literal understanding of the pasuk. 1 year may not go by with this holiday not celebrated, and it must be celebrated, again mentioned b'chol shana v'shana, every single year. Well, it wasn't so simple. It wasn't as if Mordechai and Esther could just say, let's make this a chag every single year, and then suddenly it became a chag. It didn't work that way. They had to go through the proper channels. They had to go through the Sanhedrin, the Anshe Knesset HaGadolah, the men of the Great Assembly at the time. And now, of course, it's a woman appearing before the men of the Great Assembly. And so often when the text, the Bible, does not provide us with some of the details, the Talmud, the Midrash will come in and to provide us with what they perceive as to be some of the details that are missing. And so let's take a look at the Gemara and see what it tells us. There are two stories that are mentioned here. It's not clear if there are it's not clear if there are two different versions to the same story, or if indeed there are two subsequent stories that actually transpired. Either one of these two, or both of them did, because there's a slight difference between the two. And so the Gemara, filling in the blanks as to what transpired, tells us as follows. Amar Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda. He said, this is what transpired in order to be able to be koveya, to create Purim as the holiday that we know it today. Shalachalahem Esther l'chachamim. Esther sent to the chachamim, meaning to the members of the Anshe Knesset Hagadolah, Hiv'uni lidorot, established me for all future generations. Shalchula, they answered back to her, that is not the smartest thing that we could do right now. It's very unwise. Why? In short, you do, then we're celebrating not just our victory, we're celebrating the defeat of our enemies. Well, they'll see this as a slap in the face. They, in turn, will be jealous, perhaps outraged, and that isn't going to play out very well. So it's not smart. Shalchalahem, she said, well, that really doesn't work, that argument. Why? Take a look at the last chapter of Megillat Esther, Perek Yud, which we don't have here in front of us, but there it says that Kvar Ketuva Ani, I am already recorded, meaning the story is already recorded in the chronicles of Madai and Paras. The story's there. People know the story. And this is the end of the way that it's recorded in the Talmud. Apparently, the Chachamim caved at that moment and said, okay, Esther, you have a point there. They could have come back, of course, with a counter-argument. What's written is one thing, but a public celebration is different. That's going too far. They didn't. Apparently, they just caved and said, okay, she's got a point there. Here's the other story. Esther sent to the Chachamim, I'm just skipping a few words, Kitvuni lidorot. The first was, Kivuni established me as a chag. This one is to record me. In other words, let's write this down, and let's canonize this and make it part of Tanakh. That was her request. That's what we have. That is, of course, the first of the 4 mitzvot that we perform on Purim, the only one that we perform twice. I guess it would be redundant to perform the others twice, but in any event, we read the Megillah at night and during the day as well. And they answered back to her. This time they based it on a verse to show that it was indeed prohibited to record this and to canonize this as part of Tanakh. And I always wondered why this time they based it on a verse, whereas in the other story they based it on logic. And it may be because she was referring to writing this down, to recording it. Well, if you're asking this to be recorded and to be canonized, to be part of Tanakh, then we have to use the model that already exists in Tanakh. The only argument we have to counter that are psukim that show that this is not permitted. There is a pasuk in Sefer Mishlei that lefi pshuto shel mikra, in other words, in its context, is dealing with something else entirely. Nevertheless, the word there, shalishim, is used. Shalishim sounds similar to the word shileshim. The opening words of that verse are halo katavti lecha, I have written for you, as if to say I, whoever that I is, and that let's assume that that's Hakadosh Baruch Hu, that's God himself, and that's debated too. In any event, however that pasuk is understood, permit has been granted to record the story or variations of the same story of the nation of Amalek wanting to wipe us off the planet of the earth, to eradicate us. Permission has been granted for 3 such recordings. And we already have 3 such recordings. I skipped a lot of the text in the Gemara itself. What are the 3 such recordings? The first war with Amalek that they waged against us upon our exodus from Mitzrayim, as recorded in Sefer Shemot. The second, when that is recapped in Sefer Devarim, Parashat Zachor, which of course we read on the Shabbat before Purim Day, but the Shabbat before Purim. On Purim Day, we read the actual event as recorded in Sefer Shemot, so we read both, we get both of those in. And then the third is Sefer Shmuel, when Shaul was commanded to destroy and wipe out all of Amalek. He didn't, and that's one of the reasons for perhaps the primary, if not the only reason why he lost his kingship, and then, of course, his subsequent demise, not only in terms of being the king, but in terms of his life as well, when he decided perhaps to take his own life. She wrote back saying to them, I'm going to show you up. And there's another way to understand the same pasuk. And what the Gemara actually says is ad she, until they went ahead and they deduced even further and understood, well, you know what? Esther's not leaving the room. We just realized something. She didn't come to be granted permission and then to say, okay, never mind, and then leave. She's staying. And she was adamant. So they reinterpreted the recordings in the Torah so that the story as it's recorded that transpired in Sefer Shemot and the recap of that in Sefer Devarim only counts as one. Well, now we've got room for a third, which is Megillat Esther. And finally she said, thank you very much. And then Esther had left the building, to paraphrase the famous quote, as it were. Okay, so question number one is, why was Esther so adamant in establishing this as a Chag? And assuming that these were subsequent events, she got her Chag, why was she so adamant about having the Megillah read? I mean, think about it. The story of Hanukkah, we don't have anything that we read. We do, of course, have the sources. We have Maccabees 1 and 2. We have other sources as well. We even have pieces here and there in the Talmud, but we have not introduced anything as part of our liturgy on Hanukkah or on many other days that we celebrate. Why Purim? What is the big deal that she insisted and persisted? That's question number one. I realize we're going to be short on time, especially because we started late, so perhaps we'll skip some of the sources. If you take a look at the next source that I quoted here, this is from the Mishnah. Now, the Mishnah tells us something really, really fascinating. Perhaps we're familiar with this. Purim itself, as we mentioned, must be celebrated on the 14th, right? The day after the war. Or the 15th in cities that are walled, like Shushan was walled at that time. Fine. That we understand. But what about the actual mitzvot of the day? Those are to be performed on Purim, with one exception in certain places, and that is the reading of the Megillah. And the Mishnah tells us that for small villages, known as Kfarim, who did not have the wherewithal, did not have people that had the ability to read the Megillah for them, that just like they did not have the ability to read the Megillah, they also did not have people that had the ability to read the Torah for them on Mondays and Thursdays. So therefore, when people will be gathered together in the Kfarim, in the villages anyway, in order to hear the Torah reading, in order to bring their court cases to the Beit Din, which were established on Monday and Thursday, because those were days of Yom HaKnisa, literally days of gathering, meaning those were market days. So Monday and Thursday were market days. Since Monday and Thursday were market days, people were out in the open anyway. Great idea. Let's read the Torah on those days for them. Because on Shabbat, it might not necessarily work out in Kfarim, where people can just come together. So let's do it on Mondays and Thursdays. Better idea. Let's set up courts. People are in the, maybe not better, but an equally important idea. People are already gathered together in the marketplaces. This is a great day for one of these booths, as it were, right? To be, as I can imagine to myself, to be set up for Beit Din. So now, if they're already gathered together, and Purim is going to fall on any other day of the week, but there is nobody there to read the Megillah for them. In other words, they would bring in somebody, they would import somebody from the larger communities to come in on the Mondays and Thursdays to read the Torah for them anyway. They're already here. They are able to read the Megillah in the Kfarim, in the villages, on the Yom HaKnisa, on these market days, on the previous Monday and Thursday.
So is this similar, Lahavdil, to taking all American holidays and making them on the closest Monday?
I think it is.
It's somewhat similar, Lahavdil, of course.
I think it is, maybe
Somewhat
because
similar.
it's already part of the weekend and people will be able to get off easier.
So in that case,
yes.
when we look at various movements who are taking our the Chagim, and putting it on a convenient day, Sunday afternoon, Sunday evening, are they really, I don't know what to say, are they being true to this whole concept? Or is it really something that's off the beaten track and that we, unless we today, can't really look at it with any kind of a positive eye?
Well, I think that it's a great question. I think we can, and the Rabbanut HaRashit, the chief rabbinate of Israel, even does. Not, they don't take it, of course, from American holidays on Monday, but they did use this very notion as one of the, maybe the only, I'm not sure, halachic source for what to do when Yom HaAtzmaut falls right after Shabbat. Right. When do we celebrate Yom HaAtzmaut? Do we celebrate it on Sunday? Or do we push it off to Monday? Or if it falls on Friday, do we push it off to the following Monday? And indeed, they push it off. So Purim cannot be pushed off because of the understanding of certain verses that we mentioned before, which we do not have time to get into now. So the reading of the Megillah has to be early, right? But the reading of the Megillah can be earlier for the reason we mentioned. So already this concept exists in our sources. It exists in Megillat Esther, and the way that the Mishnah explains it further, the concept of moving a mitzvah of a day earlier is okay to do. So now that, for example, really celebrating Yom HaAtzmaut shouldn't be a problem on any day. But what about the recitation of Hallel, which we know is sanctioned by, as in the chief rabbinate has given a thumbs up to, What about reciting that on a different day? So what they decided to do is, because of Chilul Shabbat, since all, really, not just the overwhelming majority, but basically everybody in Israel, well, Jews in Israel anyway, celebrate Yom HaAtzmaut. Of course, the Arabs do not, but they celebrate Yom HaAtzmaut. There is concern that there will be Chilul Shabbat, right, desecration of Shabbat, on either in preparation of or following, and therefore they pushed off Yom HaAtzmaut one more day to sometimes it's on Vav Iyar, and I think in some configurations sometimes it's on Zayin Iyar.
I think that happens with Lag BaOmer as well, which doesn't have the same, chozek as the other, but I think it's pushed off because the kids with the fight, the bonfires.
So for bonfires, sure,
right.
and for school trips and the like,
Right.
certainly.
Right.
As an actual Chag itself, that's never pushed off. But Yom HaAtzmaut itself has been officially pushed off, and this is the main source for that. So indeed, we do have such a concept, okay? But if you think about it, take a look at the last line of this source. Chal Yot b'Shabbat. Let's say Purim falls on Shabbat. It falls on Yudala, the 14th falls on Shabbat, okay? We don't read the Megillah on Shabbat because before the days of an Eruv like we have now, there was concern one may carry their Megillah. Fine. So, the Krachim, or the walled cities, their Purim's Saturday night and Sunday anyway. That problem is solved. The Kfarim, the villages, will have the Megillah read for them on Thursday. But if we, let's say here in, I was going to say New Jersey because I live in New Jersey, and I like several of us, of course, I had to deal with the traffic on the way here. But in any event, in New York City, okay, when should we read the Megillah? Remember, Purim is still on Shabbat, but when should we read the Megillah if we can't read it on Shabbat? And it can't be later. It has to be earlier. When should we read the Megillah? What makes sense to?
Before Thursday night.
It's Friday.
Thursday night and Friday. And you would think that it has to be. And whatever other reasoning there may be to make it even earlier than that, that should trump everything else. It has to be the closest to the date. However, the Mishnah tells us, Kifarim va'ayarot gedolot, villages, meaning those areas that would read it on Thursday anyway, and larger cities, Manhattan, Makdimim l'makanisa, they go back also to that Thursday. And then, of course, walled cities the following day on Sunday. Why? Doesn't make any sense. Why are they already reading on the Thursday before and not just the day before on Friday? That's question number 2. Okay? Let's go a step further. Hanukkah and Purim are very similar. Now think about it. While we may have festive meals on Hanukkah, there's no mitzvah to eat on Hanukkah. If you take a look at just what I bolded here, because we're short on time, Esther and Mordechai established that Purim will be a day of mishteh v'simcha, of merriment, of eating, of drinking. Hanukkah is not. Many other days are not. Umishloach manot ish, what? Sending gifts to each other, which of course has become, unfortunately, more about competition and who can outdo whom, or going out of your way to insult people by not giving so-and-so, but by giving so-and-so. Hopefully that's not really the case, but what's Mishlach Manot all about? There is no other Chag, not a Chag d'Oraita on a biblical level, not a Chag d'Rabbanan on a rabbinic level, where there's anything that comes close to this, with one exception, I believe, and that is for Pesach, but that's only to provide best food, next best money, right, ma'ot chitin, money, so that the poor who can't afford of their own to buy food so that they have food, they have the food for the 4 cups of wine and for the matzah and maror, meaning for to be able to have a proper celebration of the Seder. But that's given in advance, and that's only to provide for them. What is this mitzvah of matanot le'evyonim, the gifts to the poor on Purim Day, all about? There's a mitzvah to give tzedakah anyway every day. And what's this mitzvah Mishlach Manot all about? It doesn't seem to have any grounding in any other celebration whatsoever. You look in the Chumash and you find nothing of the sort. Okay. Called Dichvin.
People actually looked outside to see, or wherever they were, had a minyan in their shul to see if they didn't have a place for someone to go.
Right.
And people would leave an empty seat at their table. The person shouldn't be embarrassed.
That's
when
correct.
They come into the
That's
house.
correct. But again, that was okay. You have a point there about Matanot Levinim. You have a point there. As a complete aside, it is fascinating that we mentioned this at the Seder after Kadesh Urchatz Karpas Yachatz, and now we started Magid, and they missed that, and now we're inviting people. It doesn't make any sense. That originally was an announcement in Shul, in Shuls, as you mentioned, where there was a minyan, that there was an announcement, and it's such a beautiful concept that they incorporated it later into once we began the Haggadah, once we began Magid itself. Okay, but you have a very good point there. We'll leave that alone for now. Okay, and then finally we have the 10th chapter of Megillat Esther. It's completely superfluous. The Megillah ends after the 9th, right? We all know this. The Megillah ends after Perek Tet. It's finished. If we want to have one pasuk to sum everything up, fine, provide us with one verse, attach that, add that to Perek Yud. Why is there a separate Perek, which is only 3 verses? If you take a look at it, the strangest thing is the last verse. It tells us, Ki Mordechai HaYehudi, who was the second in command to Achashverosh, and Gadol HaYehudim, which could be understood to be a great Jew, or great for the Jews, V'ratzui l'rov echav, and he was loved by most of his brothers. The Gemara makes a point of saying, by most, not by all. Why not by all? Well, some blame him for this entire for the entire duration of the story, right? Because you're such a hotshot, you didn't bow down to Haman. What, there weren't other great Rabbanim around? Of course there were. Well, they all bowed down, so it was mutar. Yeah, the Gemara goes out of its way. Maybe Haman was wearing this, maybe... True, but they all bow down. One guy wouldn't bow down, and you knew that because of you. He wanted, of course, there's more to the story, but Haman wanted to annihilate all of the Jews, so some people basically hated his guts and said, this all happened because of you, and if it weren't for you, there never were our lives and the nation of Am Yisrael never would have been in danger in the first place. In any event, the Gemara ends by telling us, keep something important in mind, which we'll get back to later. But where's Esther? She's the story. She's the one that insisted, according to the Talmud, on everything we have above. It was Esther that went forth to the Chachamim. Mordechai apparently wasn't with her, and if she is, the Chachamim didn't see it significant enough to mention. And so the Megillah ends with a postscript and mentions how great Mordechai was, and there's nothing here about Esther. That doesn't make any sense. Where is where is she? She should be here in the text as well. She is the heroine or the hero of the story. Okay. Is there anything anybody else wanted to add at this point? Okay. We're actually going to close this pretty soon. What I want to do is to show you just a short chart that of course.
Are you going to answer any of these questions?
Of course. Of course. But I'm hoping you have an answer of your own too. Okay. Absolutely. That's what this is all. That's what this half an hour time slot, maybe a little bit longer, is all about. I have here for you a chart of some of the linguistic or literary parallels between the story of Yosef, which we are now in the midst of reading, and the story of Megillat Esther. And in fact, there are many, many more. There are approximately 35 linguistic parallels, and I only gave you about 10.
Manot also used by Yosef with his
Thank
brothers?
you.
Okay.
As I just mentioned, there are a total of 35. That is indeed one of them that's mentioned. That's right.
Is it? Oh, is it? Is it?
I didn't have my note there.
Oh, okay.
No.
No, I don't have that example there. But that's exactly right. When he gave them presents or food, it does say masot, but it does also use the word manot. That is absolutely correct. And it does use it by, I believe, and it does use it, of course, mishlach manot ish l're'ehu. There are so many parallels. But let's just take a look. When Yosef interpreted the dreams of Paro, what does the Torah tell us? What does the Torah tell us? We just read it, I believe, yesterday, right? Vayitav hadavar be'enei Pharaoh. And it was good in the eyes of Paro. He had dismissed all of the previous explanations of his 2 dreams, and he heard Yosef's interpretation, and he liked that idea. Word for word. Vayitav hadavar be'enei hamelech. A few times throughout in Megillat Esther, we find that it was good in the eyes of the king. Another one, we're not going to go through all of them because we get the idea. Yosef found favor in the eyes of Potiphar, and then Vatihi Esther the same terminology. Esther found favor in the eyes of Koro'eha, in the eyes of everybody that saw her. Or putting it another way, if I may, it's Torat Chayim, so I have a little bit more leeway than perhaps in some other Iyun I would present. She was drop dead gorgeous, and because she was drop dead gorgeous, everybody that saw her said, wow. Now maybe it's not just referring to her physical beauty, but that certainly caught everybody's eye as well. Vayitzof Paro, Paro was angry. Vayitzof HaMelech, Achashverosh was angry. And the list goes on. One of my favorites actually is the third to the last one that I recorded for you. We only find this verb, vayit apak, which literally means he held back. There's another interpretation too, twice. We do find the same word, lihitapek, in the infinitive, to hold back, on the part of Yosef as well, that he was no longer able to when he finally revealed himself to his brothers. But Vayit Apak held back that exact term we only find twice. First by Yosef, when after he cried the first time. Now remember, he had turned around, he cried. He didn't want the brothers, of course, to see him crying. It was probably just a little bit of tears. It was silent crying. He wiped his face, perhaps he turned around, and then he ordered his waiters, as were his servants, right, to serve the food. Good. With Haman, we find Vayitapak Haman. Haman held back as well. As to exactly what's going on there, what he's holding back, that's for a different shiur for a different time. Okay? Furthermore, Vayarkevoto, he gave him to ride Bimirkevet Hamishne. The equivalent today would be Air Force Two, the chariot of the second in command of the viceroy. We find that by Yosef, and we find it again not the Mirkevet Hamishne, but that Mordechai, in the very last pasuk that we alluded to or just mentioned before, read before, was Mishne Lamelech Achashverosh. If you think about it, these linguistic parallels, as I mentioned, there are more than 30 of them, are intentional. They cannot be accidental. It's impossible. And whenever we have linguistic or literary comparisons or parallels between one text and another, and the Chachamim, of course, use this device all the time. It is one of the ways in which the Torah can be understood and expanded upon. Then there's a thematic parallel as well. There has to be a thematic parallel. So now let's just take a break for a moment from the sheet and just think about the first of these two stories in Sipur Yosef. We were reading it just yesterday, right? And think about not just the bizarre behavior of Esther and the instituting of these mitzvot, and they're going for the Chachamim, like we said, but Yosef's perhaps even more bizarre behavior. If you just think about the story, from the moment that the brothers come to Mitzrayim until he finally says to them, Ani Yosef, and even beyond that point, it's very bizarre. It's very strange. His actions, we all know this, are just probably things that we never would have come up with. Now, some of them he comes up with because of his sheer brilliance and insight and knowing that I have to get from here, point A, when the brothers came to see me, to B, C, and D, and all the way to Z, and he's able to think that far ahead to be able to plan all that out, or perhaps to plan in stages. I got to B, now I'll plan for C, now I'll plan for D. He obviously had this brilliant insight that most would not, if perhaps nobody else would have. Okay, fair enough. But what's he thinking? Why is he accusing the brothers of being spies? Why the whole story with Binyamin? Why putting the brothers in jail for 3 days and then flipping what he originally said? Because originally he said, Shulchu mikem echad, send one brother home, the rest of you will be in jail, you'll be in Beit HaSohar. And then instead, after being in jail for 3 days, he sends them all home and he takes Binyamin. And now they got to go home and face their dad without Benjamin. And he doesn't care about his father? Now that's a story that Rabbi Iyun from Gushman Harazion deals with, and others do too, is what about the feelings for his dad? His dad could literally have a heart attack, which is what Yehuda basically is saying when he steps up to the plate. Yesterday morning we read the story of Vayigash Elav Yehuda and said, we can't go home, because if we go home without Binyamin, Dad's going to die. He will have a heart attack. He will die. It will be his demise. We're not going home. I'll stay here instead of Binyamin. That might be a little bit easier for Dad to handle. But Shimon's gone, Yosef's gone. They're talking to Yosef, of course. Binyamin gone. That's not going to happen. What is Yosef thinking in every single step of the way? What's on his mind? So do we have any suggestions at all? The classic Parshanim say a lot about
dreams,
that.
the fulfillment of the dreams. So
Okay.
you want to make sure everything they would bow and would come together.
Correct.
I think I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
No.
Go ahead. You say.
Cecile?
I don't think he just came up with this on the spot.
Okay.
I think that these years that he's been away, we call it in a captivity, or maybe he was in Egypt,
Sure.
he lived a much different lifestyle than he lived back in Canaan when he was there.
Sure.
And I think he's been playing these scenarios out in his own head all of these years. Now everybody appears at one time. So I think there are snippets from this and snippets from that all come together, and we can't forget that there's also an emotional aspect because he's the main character.
Correct.
You know, he's not just looking in from the outside. He's not Shakespeare writing a play about somebody else.
Right.
He's the play himself.
Absolutely. I would agree 100%. Rabbi Garrett?
I would say very similar, going back to what you said about Mordecai at the end, Retzui L'Rovachat.
Right.
Some people were angry with him because you really were not sensitive to the needs of the other people, and you had your own personal agenda, and you cared primarily about your personal agenda, not about other people. And I think to a certain degree, because Yosef had these dreams, and he feels that these dreams need to be fulfilled, it is about, what's going on with me, and I want my vision to come to fruition, and everybody else be damned. Sure.
And in addition to that, of course, this is dealt with by many of the classic Parshanim and contemporaries as well, and that is the fact that Yosef also wanted to be sure that the brothers wouldn't treat Binyamin the same way they treated him, even though he brought it upon himself, and he knew that fully well, as you, Rabbi Garrett, just mentioned. And Binyamin, as far as Yosef knew, didn't do anything to bring upon the hatred of his brothers towards him, but nevertheless, he just wanted to be sure, so he's going through all of these steps. I think there's something larger here. as Rav Asher mentioned at the outset, I would happen to agree, and many of the medieval Parshanim take that same approach, is that Yosef was basically, again to paraphrase another movie, on a mission from God. Welcome, you may join us if you wish. He was on a mission from God, and that is, God sent me these dreams. I have a responsibility to see these dreams through to their fulfillment, and that means first I have to get the brothers to come down here, and they did that of their own volition because of the famine. Except absent from the scene was, of course, Binyamin. So now I've got to find a way to figure out a way to bring Binyamin down. All right, I've accomplished that. We're moving through this very quickly, right? But wait a minute, the second dream included mom and dad. Well, mother's dead, so it either refers to Bilhah, as Rashi says, some say it refers to Leah, who in a sense was really the mother of all of the, she became in a sense the mother figure of all 12 of the children, 13 with Dinah, perhaps more if indeed they had twins, whatever it may be. So he has to figure out a way to bring them down too. But now think about it for a minute. Yosef realizes, as far as I'm concerned, that there has to be much more to the story. Because to bring them together, that I can do now. But I'm not ready yet. I have to create a situation where the brothers may be jealous of Binyamin by giving him 5 times the amount of food. And then when they go home, because I was there when that transpired, I have to warn them, don't fight with Binyamin. I don't want to hear any stories about along the way that a fight broke out and that you tried to treat Binyamin the same way you treated me. He realizes that to bring his family together again, because that's what his dream represented a lot more. It's not bringing the family together physically. That we could have all come up with. It's bringing back the family emotionally and spiritually as well. In other words, taking the split, the complete dysfunctional, perhaps the most dysfunctional family in the entire Chumash, and making sure that we can be together, not for 5 minutes, not fleeting, but as a family, to bring the family back together again. And so Yosef goes out of his way, I believe, to create a scenario in which he is now all but certain, because you can never be completely certain, but all but certain that the relationships in the family have been repaired as much as possible. The memories will always be there. The feelings of, on some level, of course, of the hatred, of the angst, of the anger that father had towards him, which is expressed in the Torah, all those things will always be there. They'll always be latent, but they can't come to the fore anymore. We have to be able to function together as a family. If I bring everybody down here, including mom and, I apologize, I'm running late.
Yeah.
Can I wrap it up in 2 minutes? Okay, I apologize. Thank you. I'll try. Okay. And we are not united as a family, then there's no point in coming together. I completely missed the boat in what God was telling me to do. God sent me on a mission, and that mission was to bring the family back together again as much as I possibly can for eternity, to live together as a family. Okay? With that, we can now go back to Megillat Esther, and then we'll finish up. What was Esther thinking? Esther was looking at our future. We almost were completely obliterated. We were almost completely, I apologize.
No, this is amazing.
Thank you. We were almost completely done away with, annihilated as a people. Well, to bring us back together again, okay, fine, we survived. We are together again. Who said that we're going to survive long enough to see ourselves into the future? In order for that to transpire, Esther and Mordechai took a look at the text of Yosef. They replicated, or whoever wrote this, Megillat Esther, replicated that text itself with a message. And that message is one of unity. Why is there Mishloach Manot? Because unlike what it's become, it's about bringing people together. Why Matanot LeEvyonim? The same idea. Why reading the Megillah when it can't be read on Shabbat 2 days earlier, no longer, but 2 days earlier on Thursday instead of on Friday at the opportunity? Because Berov Am, and indeed that's one of the mitzvot of Purim, is that it's better to hear the Megillah in a Beit Knesset or in a large gathering than in a smaller gathering. The more, the merrier. Because that is a display of the fact that we are all in this together, that we have a people, and we must pay homage to our peoplehood and not to our factious people, which we indeed are as well. And so therefore, when the Megillah is read earlier than on Shabbat, it will be read the day before, when the people in the Kfarim, in the villages, are reading it as well. And finally, with the last pasuk, and I know I'm running late, Mordechai was Ratsui L'Overchav. He was only loved by the majority of his brothers, and not by all. But take a look at the closing words. What's important to remember is, that's true, but he was Doresh Tov La'amo. He sought after the good of his people, V'dover Shalom. That word is key, and I should have highlighted that word perhaps more than any other in the entire sheet. All he wanted, like Esther, was to establish peace among his people. Because together with Esther, we know that already. It's a given, she doesn't need to be mentioned. But Mordechai, just like Esther, the two of them together realized that the key to our success is our unity. The key to our success, as, by the way, the rabbinic organization Torat Chayim represents, is all about all of us treating each other with respect, and for each different faction of Judaism to respect one another, to work together, to further our success as we continue along this beautiful road. Have a good day, and thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, the battery.
Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know what to do here. So.
Next o'clock.
I'll use the time.
Ducati. You can keep them whatever you want, whatever you like. Again, I apologize for going over time.
No problem.